Tres, dos, uno. All right. Welcome back to the Brown Perspective. I'm here with my co-host Eduardo, Lucho, Luchador.
Buenos días, buenos días, buenos días, buenos días.
I say Lucho Luchador because your Skype name is Lucho. So I'm assuming
Lucho.
that may have something to do with wrestling.
Lucho, es interesante porque como Marc Anthony, Lucho, 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 contra la corriente. No, Lucho es un buen verbo
Ah, what?
y también pues de luchar, ¿no? Yo creo que todos estamos en la lucha y bueno, que me has ayudado a entender a mi nombre en una perspectiva muy diferente,
Ah, interesting.
Romero,
I thought it was related to Lucho Libre.
Lucho Libre.
Yeah,
Pues
lucha.
nosotros teníamos uno de los ciclistas más famosos en Colombia, se llama Lucho Herrera. Así
Oh,
que tú eras Lucho, ese es el referente, ¿no? Lucho Herrera. Y desde ahí salimos los escarabajos de Colombia porque podemos trepar esas montañas, escalar esas montañas en nuestras bicicletas porque obviamente vivimos en una zona montañosa.
wow. I didn't know there would be so much to a Skype name. So much history there.
Well,
So
there
much
is. I
connection to
mean,
in a screen
it,
name. Yeah.
and when you think about when you named your son, right? So you had to. I mean, there were some there's some intent and some meaning that maybe your son is not going to get, but at least that you know
Oh,
that you had when you name. So I think when you name something, I think
yeah.
that's a pretty significant thing.
Yeah, I just totally agree because you're talking about human names, but I wasn't expecting that type of commitment to a name to transfer to a screen name for a Skype, where usually you see people like Brown Puppy 22, or you have screen names that are not that serious in that sense. So I thought Lucho was one of these type of screen names that you just choose because it's something that some connection to something random. I wasn't expecting the whole connection to the Columbia, but that's nice, man. I like it. It's good. Now
Porque
I
estoy en la lucha.
uh-huh learned a little bit something today. So, all right, let's get this started. Let's. There's nothing much going on these days, but we definitely there's always a lot to talk about. But there's just one thing that's still in the headlines, and that's this lockdown, this coronavirus. We're getting through it. We were talking about this earlier. We do want to focus on it in a way because that's everything that's in the news, but we don't want to focus too much on the virus itself or what's happening around the world. We wanted today to focus on some of the good things that have come out of this.
Yes, some of the positive things that I think that sort of put this experience in perspective. And like anything, I think sometimes the most memorable experiences in your life can be both the most challenging, but also the happiest. So I think those are the times that we as people tend to remember more.
Yeah, and I hadn't considered this until just now while you were talking, but imagine being a kid anywhere from 6 to 9 or 10 years old where events like this stay with you for the rest of your life
Hmm.
and what it must be feel like for them. I suppose it's going to come to a certain extent. It's going to depend on the type of energy that the parents transfer to the kids. Because if it's a lot of nervous energy where the
Hmm.
parents don't let anybody leave the house, then that may not be a pleasant experience for a kid. But if it's something different where the parents are handling this in a way that's responsible and that's not transferring that stress to the kids,
Imbalanced.
yeah, exactly. And then the kids should see this as a positive experience where they got to stay home, they got to play, they
Yeah.
got a break from school, and
And they got to
that'll
bond with their parents or their love with their little brother and sister at a deeper level, right? Because in some ways you're forced to have that human connection, and and your family, right? You don't. There's that saying that you don't get to choose your family,
mm,
and that's true. And hopefully, if you're stuck with a good family, you're gonna make the most out of it. If you're stuck with an okay family, I mean, you're gonna struggle, but maybe this is also an opportunity where there's gonna be a lot of breakthroughs, right? So I think that the COVID-19 is definitely helping us connect at that level, and also to think that So right now we're in the Holy Week, right? So this was Holy Week, Semana Santa, which is a huge week not only for the Catholics, for the Jews, I believe the Muslims, a lot of faiths. Maybe not the Muslim. I'm ignorant, so I apologize if I'm misspeaking. But I think it's such an important time in people's lives spiritually, and it's the first time that we're doing this in a pandemic in the last 100 years. So to your point, I think that this is not only going to change that child, but it's also going to change the society around that child and the type of decisions and the type of things that as a society we decide to implement or not implement. And then if there's enough unrest to have people mobilize and vote and go out and sort of do the movements, the work that's necessary to bring about change.
There's no change coming, man. Bernie Sanders already dropped out.
Oh
Sorry to be a
man,
downer here.
I know. For some people, as I was talking to Romero earlier, that may be seen as a positive thing. The fact that he's now out of the race was an opportunity for the for those who are Democrats to come together, unite, and then try to figure out how to get to more independence. And so there's just more an opportunity. And also, I think more importantly, it gives people time to get over the because I know there's a lot of Bernie Sanders lovers out there, and it's amazing the way that he connected to the Latino community, right? White guy, white old man from New York, but who grew up in Vermont, and he was able to connect with the Latino community, like similar to what like Bobby Kennedy and JFK did. I feel like is it he kind of now feels like that type of politician who was from pretty well off circumstances, but he was able to connect with the people and understand what were the things that people really cared about the most.
I don't know what's gonna happen with Joe Biden. I don't. He's not gonna win. There's a good chance that he's not gonna beat Trump.
That's the thing. We have a proven record, and I think the whole reason this is fresh is because I just this morning I read there was an article on Political on the fact that some of Bernie Sanders, high level senior advisors wanted him to be more aggressive on Joe Biden to go for the jugular. I think is how they called it in terms of calling him out on on things that he supported in the past, and there were some other particular things that I think they wanted him to really be aggressive, um, and I guess he decided not to do it because I think Bernie Sanders also apparently he didn't like issue polling. He also wanted to keep the 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 campaign on the issues. He didn't want to like lead with, oh, here's some opposition research on my opponent. You should put this. So he was trying to keep it positive. So more power to him that he decided to run his own race based on his values and how he thought he wanted to run his campaign. So I think I appreciate that. I think that definitely shows a lot of character.
I think it was, from my personal view, I think it's more opportunistic on his part because he doesn't want to burn his bridges with the rest of the Democratic establishment.
Mm.
If he comes out swinging, they'll alienate him. He'll be an outcast like Ralph Nader.
Well, he's
So
always been, right? So that's the thing. He was an
no,
independent, so he
but
only. I
he
mean,
still runs as a Democrat. He doesn't come out swinging. If he wanted to, there was so much that he could have said about Hillary and about Biden. And we know because that's exactly what Trump is going to do. That's why I think that Biden's in trouble because Bernie went soft on him. Bernie was trying to play by whatever playbook he had, where he doesn't, like you said, he doesn't want to get into the politics
more the
of
negative
just,
things.
yeah, hurling negative things at his opponent. But Trump is not going to hold back. And the one thing that Trump does have, even if I don't, there's a lot about him that I don't like. You have to at least appreciate that the guy is a good entertainer.
Yeah.
And if there's debates, he's gonna chew him up. He's gonna chew up Joe Biden. And apart from whatever else is going on with the politics and the fact that Biden is not really that big of a difference, if you think about it, what he's gonna get in there in terms of what he's gonna do. On a personal level, Trump is just gonna have a field day with this guy. And well, I didn't. I could ask. I did want to ask you something else about Biden, but maybe let's save the conversation on Biden for towards the end, if you don't mind, because I do want
No,
to
not at
go
all.
back to the positives about the coronavirus. So, from your point of view, Bernie dropping out is a positive. Sure, don't I don't agree with that, but we'll we'll leave it at that. Um, the other what you were commenting on before that, what got me to think about Bernie Sanders is you were talking about the societal change that's
Hmm.
going to come about as a result of this lockdown and people spending time together. Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. That's definitely a positive. I was thinking about again about kids who are 6 to 9 or whatever when you're all of those memories stick with you because I have some memories from Mexico from growing up over there that have stayed with me and they're very vivid memories and they weren't
Hmm.
traumatic memories but they're still very vivid because they're very unique. So I remember when my younger sister was born in a small town. I think my mom was still at the hospital in the city and we're from a small town and this was January and it never rains it never snows over there. It gets really cold,
Hmm.
but we stayed snowed in. It snowed for a day. We weren't snowed in. It snowed for like a day.
Wow.
But
And
then what
that's
I
something in Mexico, I
yeah,
imagine.
exactly, yeah. And so I remember that specifically coming out, and my dad was looking out the window and saying, "Hey, look, it's snow." And then we looked out, and sure enough, the snow was there. And but I do remember that my mom, I think she may have had a recovery period for a few days, and during that time, it was my dad had to take care of us, and so he was the one cooking for us and doing all that and we ate potatoes for like three days straight because not that my dad didn't know how to do anything else because he's actually a pretty decent cook, but what happened was and this is just me now piecing all the pieces together of what happened in that here's what
I'm
I think.
picturing this right now.
Well, I have a whole bunch of different memories, and I think they were all related to that particular week. I do recall
Mm.
also that these are farming communities, and I do recall that there was because of the changes in the season or poor planning or I don't know what happened. A lot of people ended up planting potatoes, but
Mm.
I think there was an oversupply, and so
Potatoes.
instead of throwing them away, maybe the demand wasn't high enough, or there was just too much. So instead of the farmers throwing them away, they essentially went to all the towns, and they told the people just come and pick potatoes, and whatever you pick, you take home.
Nice.
I don't know if you paid for it, or I don't know if you were just buying them
Well,
really
it's
cheap.
probably cheap, yeah, because they
Exactly.
have to throw it away, right? So that's what's
Yeah.
happening here
Yeah.
right now because of the pandemic, and here in California and Florida, and it's crazy because at the same time there's people who are starving, right? So in some
Yeah. Yeah. You
ways,
have to throw it
that's
away.
how like a rural community is more resilient than an urban community because at least in a rural community, you kind of have that sort of you have the food supply right close by, and you have some more survival skills that somebody who lives in the city and depends on the supermarket being open.
Yeah, and so that was the just to finish what I was saying. That's how we ended up eating potatoes for a few days. But again, those memories, I still remember that stuff. I've forgotten a lot about that time period because I left when I was
But how old were you?
8 and a half when I left. Let's see, 91. No, I was 9, and then uh you know, you just mentioned the bread lines here in the U.S. I do have another also memory of what it must be like for kids right now because
Hmm.
have you heard about the schools that were giving out lunch? Then that's also a positive thing about this, how the schools came together and they understood that a lot of their student population comes from low income homes. So they've
Yep.
been giving out lunch to the students, and there's probably other like food banks that have been giving out food as well.
Hmm.
I'm fortunate enough that I don't need to go to a food bank these days to get food, but I'm sure that there might be some out there. But when we were kids, because we grew up in LA, I had we had just gotten here when the riots happened, We
Mm.
had been here for about a year and a half or 2 years. And during the riots, because they impacted specifically the area where we lived, a lot of the churches around there, they started handing out food. So we would go
Mm.
and we would stand in line to get food from the different churches that were giving out food. And again, that's a memory that stays with me. It felt really good that we were getting food.
Getting food.
To begin with, we were already poor. So even if no riots and we were just standing in line because the church was going to give us food, that would have been really nice. But because it was also
The
the riots
emergency.
happening around that time, and there was a sense of uncertainty, standing in line to get food, and so that may be repeating itself right now with kids that are going with their families to the schools to get
Hmm.
food. If they're anywhere in that age where I think that memories are still being developed in personality, those memories are going to stick with them for a really long time, and they're pleasant memories.
Yeah, no, and it's interesting because I mean, you're recalling, helping me recall my sort of my coming to America to say, but I think before saying more on that, I think the fact that I came here as an immigrant too. I got probably turned 12 when I was here, so going through that experience. But I remember being getting going to school for free, getting free lunch, and I think I was like, oh, this is great. Like I get free lunch, and why would that sucks that some people have to pay, like, and like and you're just realizing how lucky I was, and the fact that I am proud to have been one of those kids that receives free lunch at school, and B, also realizing like, damn, that is a bit pretty important uh thing for a poor family, because my mom didn't have to worry about feeding a teenage boy who played soccer and ran track uh at least one meal of the day, if not multiple. So it's amazing, right? How you don't realize how important that really truly is until there's a this type of situation.
Yeah, it's and again for kids, if they're in situations right now, especially we touched on this last week, but we haven't actually gotten into any of the personal stories, which we could try to track down maybe for the next time. It's personal stories of the immigrant community who are suffering
Hmm.
because they don't qualify for unemployment benefit, and if they lost their job, then again, depending on how much they have in savings, they may be going through situations like that where they don't know where they're going to get some food. And if the school's giving food, or if any food banks around them are giving them, then that's good, and that's a good experience for kids. And it also will, if these are kids that were growing to a certain extent a little pampered in the United States, to a certain extent, right? Because if you're the son of immigrants, then you're always in the struggle. But
Yeah.
the struggle is different now than it was before, at least for recent immigrants like yourself. And by the way, I don't want to sound like a douche when I say this, but I do want to correct the record that you said that you came in here as an immigrant. I didn't come as an immigrant. I'm an American citizen. I was born in the U.S. But
Oh, damn, my bad.
I, you
I
know,
always forget that, Romero. You're so damn Mexican that I always just assume you were like a Mexican national.
well, this is what happens
Dispensa,
when.
dispensa.
So here's the crazy thing, though. So just I'm not gonna go too much on a tangent here, but this is the crazy structure of Mexican families from small towns. My grandparents had a total of 14 kids on my dad's side,
Wow.
Catholic, right? So a lot of people can relate to that. Four of them died. So again, that gives you some insight into why they had so
That's
many, because the
mhm.
mortality rate was so high. And also, you needed a lot of people to help you with the field work
Yeah,
because it's very, it's
that's
very,
right.
it's very hard. So four of them died. So it ends up being 10. It just so happens that my dad is the oldest one of all of them. And when you're the oldest one in these small communities in Mexico, you have certain responsibilities and obligations to the
Hmm.
family. In a sense, you're like the one that's going to get sacrificed for the benefit of everyone else. So my dad was the one that had to help with the field work, help out in a lot of areas.
And work really hard.
Yeah, and none of his other siblings had to do any of that. So while my uncles got to come to the US and then look for better opportunity and settle down here, my dad was never able to do that. So my dad would come
Mhm.
work over here and then go back to Mexico with the season, with the farming season, to go and help my grandpa. So he
Mm.
went back and forth. So that's how you end up with me being born here, and within 10 or 11 months I'm back in Mexico. And then it just so happens that we stayed there for 9 years, and I came back when I was 9. uh, but yeah, that's the little segue into that.
No, that was interesting because I there's a family dynamics that mm, like things that you don't appreciate why things are a certain way and why the lifestyle sort of then kind of moves to the immigrant kid who now needs to sacrifice for their parents so they can have a better future, and it goes on and on. And obviously there comes a point where your struggles are very different. You get to a different level, right? It's like, oh, how can I make sure that my kid also goes to college and does this, does that. So interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think all of that is important because it's all about human connection. And I think that that's one of the things that a crisis forces you to, or when you migrate, right? Because you're really just traveling with your family, you're on that together. But more fundamentally, you're spending time and having a common experience, and also getting a chance to talk and get to know each other at a deeper level that was even opportune before then, because you really didn't have the chance to spend a lot of time just talking.
You think that's happening though? I've heard it in the news. I've heard that it gives people a chance to now bond and connect with each other. But let's be honest about one thing, that
Uh-huh.
being home these days is not the same as being home 30 years ago, where
No, it's not.
you could stay home these days and you could be on YouTube for
Yeah.
days going down the rabbit hole. You could start googling something that you thought you were interested in, and you end up watching kitty or puppy videos a few hours later,
Yeah.
and you could lose the whole day to that. So even if people are staying home, you think that at some point they just get fed up with YouTube, with Netflix, and they actually say, "Huh, there's I'm pretty bored. There's
Yeah.
nothing else to do," and then they actually start
Yeah.
communicating with each other.
I think so. I think that's ideally in my mind that's how it works, because like there's only because I'm working while this is happening, so I do that after work, right? Like just relax. So if you're doing that the entire day, like I think that just gets cansón and you just want to do something else, and then oh, let's do something. They start talking. Oh, I haven't heard from this person, and that's how people start connecting. I have to say, for me personally, I think it was 2 weekends ago after our show, I had like a 2.5 hour conversation with my dad, who's
Hmm.
still in Colombia. And it was kind of like the first like grown up conversation that I had with my dad. I mean, when I was in Colombia, he and my mom were not married. But I did see him, every weekend and got to spend some time with him. But I really had not had a chance to and I had visited and stuff like that, but there's always other people. So this was the first time that it was like a conversation between he and I, and
Hmm.
just talking about interesting things like what's going on with COVID, and then obviously learning about his childhood and the fact that one of the reasons that he got into he's big into books. He's a Renaissance man, so he was a firefighter, a mayor. He is a lawyer. He was a notario público. So
Your classic.
yeah,
What do they call them in Spanish? The You said it, milusos, or is there another word?
bohemio or
No, they have a word for somebody that does a little bit of everything.
Renaissance man.
No, it's a little more like a playful word. You did you say milusos?
No, milusos. Oh, como milusos.
Yeah, I thought I heard you say that, but I
No,
think that's the word that they use in Mexico. Some milusos, somebody that does a little bit of everything.
exactly. And the reason that he got into literature was because he and his brother, and he was the oldest, my dad was, and they had to sell newspapers to help the family buy. So when he was selling the weekend newspaper, people didn't want the literary review that was also included in the weekend edition. So he would take that home and read, and he developed his love for reading at that point. So getting to know a story about him, and also hopefully sharing a little bit about about me. So that's the type of human connection that I know it's probably not happening across the board, but I
And
know
that,
some people,
and
and I
so,
also people are getting disconnected too. I also hear the number of divorces
oh,
are it's going up.
yeah, I can imagine that because people are at each other's throats if they're at home and they have to deal with each other, plus work and deal with the kids. But let me get back to what you were saying about your dad. So you're telling me that the because of the situation that we find ourselves in with this lockdown and the uncertainty of the virus, that this is what gave you the opportunity to have an honest conversation with your dad that you've never had before.
I think so,
So
and I
you had
think
never there had so it sounds then like it's like just picking up the phone and talking to your dad and having like a deep thoughtful conversation would have been awkward before this if you didn't have like
yeah,
a way in.
yeah, because it was like either I'm busy running around doing things or he's busy doing going around doing things. So
But
this was like, okay, I know he's home.
mhm.
I know he's there. Like I know I'm home too. So check in on the family and then obviously just go from there. Or this is happening and telling him about the work that I'm doing. And then, going into that conversation about finding about all of these things that he's sort of has been thinking about and he's planning to do um, sort of since he is a professor, he was planning to do some online classes. We're talking about like Machu Picchu, and he just happens, and there's also some ruins in Colombia that he wants to take me, where there's an indigenous community with a bunch of se llama San Agustin.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like our local place that was of significance back in the day. So, also realizing that there's a lot of the interests that I have
Mhm.
that are common with his and being able to have those types of conversations with him. So yeah, so I credit the slowdown in the pandemic with my opportunity to be more open to having those types of conversations with my dad and not feeling like I'm constrained by time or by what he or I may be needing to do.
But to be clear, this conversation also happened only after you had binge watched YouTube and Netflix and you got pretty tired of all that.
I was tired of watching Las Chicas del Cable on Netflix.
The reason
No,
why,
actually,
yeah, go ahead.
and I have to say, because I have to say that the binge watching that we did before or during the quarantine was Project Runway, and it's funny because now my wife is making masks for people to use. So, you can see how something like completely random, like being able to sew, now becomes an essential an essential profession in a pandemic.
Yeah, definitely more power to you guys that are doing this and helping people, and at the same time having a bit of a side hustle and staying having some employment out of it, like I said, on the side, because you're still working obviously, but doing it in such a way that you're benefiting the whole community because this is something that's essential.
And to add the triple bottom line, half of the proceeds are going to go to support funds that are supporting undocumented or farm workers here in California. So
Nice.
so also supporting our gente and tying it back to your conversation that they're probably may be okay, but they need as much support as they can, or the communities or the organizations that are serving them need as much support as they can, because that way people like you and me can go and get that food, get that meal, get those things that are essential right now.
Yeah, yeah, and I would have felt guilty for if you would have said this, but uh, just 2 weeks ago or 1 week ago, I donated to the DACA fund.
Mm,
It's I forget the organization. I don't know if it's the Dreamers or something, but it's essentially it's a it what they're doing is they have a pool of funds that they fundraise from people, and um, they help specific individuals that don't have the funds to be able to pay for that process to renew their working permit.
hmm
So I think, yeah. So anyway, just saying, I'm glad I did that because otherwise I would feel pretty guilty right now that I'm not doing a lot more like you guys are donating the
No, no.
proceeds.
But I think you get into another great thing about the crisis, which is giving, right? Giving, that philanthropic spirit that I think just emerges because you realize that you in this together, and then you realize, I'm doing okay. Like, I'm well, like we can weather the storm, but how about those people who can't? Let's try to support them. Let's make sure that we advocate for government to support them. So I think there's just a giving spirit that comes out in situations like this, that comes out when you also grow up in a family who's struggling. And I think that's one of the reasons why immigrant families, or families who struggle, or whether or not you're an immigrant, right? Because I think this happens when you're poor too, right? You're struggling, you're trying to make it out, and there's this sense of like, i need to I need to help myself so I can help my family so we can get out of the situation. And if you have more people, uh, like your dad did, maybe, and I don't know if this happened or not. I don't know if after the brothers and sisters came to the U.S. and made it, if they recognized the sacrifices that he had done and sort of helped them out, or did they just kind of forget about that, right? So,
Yeah, that's a can of worms right there because you're actually opening up
I imagine. So let's say the
well,
positive. Let's say the
yeah,
positive.
yeah, yeah. Well, let me just touch on that briefly. What happens is, at least what happened with my dad in that situation was that you would think that that would be the case, that the siblings would have been grateful for it. But see, here's the problem, and this isn't unique to my dad or his family; it's unique to everyone. When someone expects you to do something, you don't
Hmm.
really get the recognition or the appreciation for it. And that's why a lot of, you just mentioned people that are getting divorced. That's why a lot of couples run into problems, because people go into relationships and they place expectations on others. And when the other person does those things, they don't get any recognition for doing it because they're supposed to do that stuff. That's why
Yeah.
assigning roles to a woman or assigning roles to a man, uh, that's one of the ways that it can get you into a lot of trouble. Uh, but because again, because once you assign a role, you expect that other person to do it, and you forget that it's not their obligation to do that. That
Mhm.
they're doing it because they're in a partnership with you, and you're expected to do stuff too. But so that was a situation with my dad where I think, again, because he was the firstborn, because it was his responsibility to help the family, he had to do
Mhm.
that, right? And so from the point of view of the siblings, there's no reason to really thank them too much or
Well, it should
to.
have been some recognition, I think, right?
Well,
I
no,
mean,
because see, here's what people do. What people do is they say, well, that's his responsibility, but if there's responsibilities that I have, then I'm going to step up and do my part. That's how people rationalize it and how they justify maybe
mhm.
not giving the recognition to someone else, because they say, well, I didn't have to give them recognition because if it would have been me, I would have done the same. But it wasn't them and they didn't have to do it. But they tell
Mhm.
themselves that they would have. So again, that's what I'm saying. It's a can of worms because it's not a simple yes or no, right or like a simple black and white when it comes to that stuff.
No.
People have, we should talk about this later, but people have specific behaviors and ways that they act that always gets us into trouble when we're dealing with others. So sorry, let's bring it back to the positive. So you were talking about the conversation that you had with your dad, which is nice. And I was trying to tease out whether this is a conversation that you could have at any point, but it was just a matter of both of you being really busy and not really having the time to, when you could actually sit down and do this, because you always felt also that you could do it tomorrow. There's no sense of, I need to do this now because I can do it at another time.
Mhm.
I was trying to kind of get to see if it was that, or if it was just that it's awkward to have conversations with your dad, because in my case, it's pretty awkward to try to have a conversation like that with my dad. I've never
Mhm.
had a serious conversation with my dad. Probably the only
Wow.
serious conversation I ever had was probably both drunk, and and even then it wasn't that serious. I've never had a conversation with him to actually know who he is as a person.
Mm.
Every single conversation is always very superficial. ¿Cómo
Yeah.
está,
Yeah.
mijo? ¿Ya comió? Véngase a comer. No haga esto. Like, just, I'm sure that it's common for a lot of families.
It was for, yeah, it was to me. I mean, that's how my conversations with my dad felt before the one that week.
Yeah, so it is maybe something like that, that it was kind of weird, and there's just something, right? So the coronavirus is good. It gave you an opportunity to have those conversations, and if it's allowing people to break through and broach specific subjects that they didn't otherwise know how, that's great. I just yeah. By the way, I'm not saying this because I'm personally like hurt or anything that I can't have a conversation with my dad. I don't feel like I really missed out on anything, because if I needed to have those conversations, they needed to happen a long time ago, right? And they never did. So I think I turned out okay. He was around. He did what he could, but
Hmm.
it's just acknowledging that, man. One time I said to myself, like, man, I don't think I ever got advice from my dad. Maybe once. Maybe, you know
Hmm.
what my dad told me? He told me once, you want to know what true fear is? That's what he told me. He says, go to the racetrack and put $500 on a horse.
Wow,
That's what he told me. And I thought
that is true fear.
yeah.
I haven't done that. I'm too chicken to do that.
Yeah, I went to the racetrack. Oh man, it's been a while since I went. I think the most that I put was $20 on a horse. I can't. I'm not a gambler. I'm not gonna blow more than $20 on a horse. Anyway.
But if you win,
Well, yeah,
that's a
dude, but
big thing.
that's the gambler's fallacy right there, or the mentality that you think that you're gonna win. The odds
That's
are that
true.
you're gonna lose. Anyhow, so here's the other thing that I wanted to bring up, and this is actually the reason why this morning I started thinking about the positive stuff that has come as a result of it.
Mm.
I heard on NPR that in India, um, air quality is a lot better because there's
Look
no
at
one out on
that.
the streets.
Look
So
at that
clear
before
blue
and after the
skies.
Guardian.
Yeah. Wow. Man, I wonder what the rates of asthma and the general health of people that live. Where's the picture? It's still loading. What is this? Dial up? Is everyone at home binge watching Netflix? Yeah, has the connection slow. Uh, yeah, it's not coming up. Let's interesting. Oh yeah, there it is. See if it loads now. Here we go. No Guardian. I don't want to subscribe.
Hello.
I think I lost you there for a second. Don't worry, I kept talking the whole time. I was trying to load the page, and yeah, this
Okay.
is this is insane. This is how it looks on a regular day? Wow,
Yeah.
that's how LA
Can
used to
you
look in the
imagine?
'70s.
That is, and yeah, I mean, I feel bad because I mean, now that I live in LA, I appreciate the clean days, but I can't imagine. And I guess if you grow up in that, it's just the normal. But that's unbelievable.
Yeah, you know what drives me crazy about LA though? When you hear about people that they need to get the smog check for their car, and the car's not gonna pass it, but they know a guy or they know a
Oh yeah,
place that's just gonna allow them
cheat
to
the test.
yeah to cheat. I just think to myself, like, yeah, you could do that, but think about the group. Don't just think about the advantage that you get to yourself. You got to think about everyone else. And not only that, you got to think, okay, if I do this, then that means other people are going to be tempted to do it also. And what if everyone else starts doing that? Then you end up with
Yeah.
this situation. It always drives me crazy when people act very selfishly for short-term personal gains to themselves without thinking of the group as a whole. I guess that makes me
Yeah.
a commie, doesn't it?
No, it's
Just
just
kidding.
that, but it's also like a financial thing. Is it really that expensive to get a car that passes the test? So I think there's also questions of privilege there and
But
resource, and people are going to try to save a little bit if they can.
well, there's way too many unknowns for that though, because you don't know how someone's going to react if you tell them that they can no longer drive that car. I mean, you're just making the assumption that because they can't afford to get a new car, that
Hmm.
that we should let them drive that old car that is polluting the city. But okay, fine, that's one option. But you don't know how the person is going to react if you tell them you can't drive this car anymore, and if you drive it, you're going to get a ticket or you can't register anymore. that person may, there may be some ingenuity in that person. There may be some extra
Mm-hmm.
hustle that they can turn to get some extra money. They may have to like bite their pride for a little bit and borrow a car from a relative until they get by. They may have to like push themselves a little more so that they
Mm-hmm.
can afford that car. And if you don't do that, if you don't have policies that um, I don't want to say that to encourage people or motivate people to do these things. I do understand that also there's like you said, there's the issue of, do you have the means to do that? I don't know. It just, it's a really hard for me. It's a discussion that is a lot more complicated than just than black and white saying that, well, they can't afford a car, so therefore we need to like let them drive that car somehow.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, if you just say, well, don't let them drive the car, then I don't know. Where's the balance, right? Like, what do you think is the best?
You invest in public transportation.
There's public transportation, yes.
I
So
know,
that's
but
one option.
obviously it depends, and depends on how much. And that right now, public transportation. I mean, well, we're talking about the positive, but having a good public transportation system is good generally. I think right now it's hard because people are not using it. So how are you gonna keep it? But I think like there were in cities like New York or DC where people don't need to have get cars because they don't need them because they can get around in trains, buses, bikes. So they really don't need them. So it's actually they get to enjoy cleaner air because they have public transportations that's more efficient, less polluting, and they get to walk and do exercise and live a different life. They don't need to worry about insurance payment, car payment, parking, and they have normal lives, right? So I think that's one of the things that a good transportation system allows you to do. And when you don't have that, I think LA is trying to move to that, but it's such a massive city that is challenging if you don't live within the core of LA proper.
Yeah. So how do you get around, and how do you? This is again, this is complex stuff, and anybody that pretends like they have a solution is BSing you. They haven't thought it all the way through, because I know sometimes I may sound like these guys that are pick yourself up by your bootstrap and do that stuff. Like, no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, like, look, you got to think it all the way through. You can't just you can't have policies that would encourage this type of behavior, because long term, 10, 20 years, you end up with places like, and I say it because of my experience in Mexico, where in Mexico everyone bends the rules because it's
Hmm.
so commonplace. Okay, well, I have a personal necessity, so I'm going to bend the rules, because if I don't do it, the government's not helping me. There's no transportation. I can't get by. So that just goes. And when you start going down that spiral, it has devastating consequences. So that where you see that type of behavior at every single level of the society. And then you have places like the US where it's a lot stricter. And they say
Hmm.
your car can't pass the smog check. That means you can't drive it, and that's it. And you
Yeah.
have to find another way of, getting by. And hopefully this society, fortunately, does have enough
Yes.
alternatives for people to turn to that. But if
Yep.
you start seeing in especially because we live here in LA, but if you start seeing more and more people saying that, oh well, it didn't pass a smog check, but I found a place that will allow me to pass the test. Yeah, when I hear that stuff, it just, I don't know what to think of it. I'm like, man, like, I don't know how this is gonna play out in 20, 30 years. So,
Well,
well,
you hope that there's enough cars now that are electric and low emissions that help reduce the impact, and then you hope that eventually that person is going to be in a position where they can buy a better car and not have to worry about breaking the law because the car is better, the technology is better, it's gotten cleaner, and and that person has progressed a little since they were in that situation. So I think that's, to your point, that's one of the things that here in the US does happen. There's a little bit more opportunity for you to get ahead if you do work hard. But I think the problem now and is that you get into a point where people are working hard, but they're not making enough to be able to get out of their situations. So then just that just creates a vicious cycle, because if you can't get out of that situation, you can improve your conditions, you're going to be stuck there. Things are going to be worse. You're not going to be able to have a better quality of life and get more things and contribute more to the economy. So I think that's why having a good opportunity is essential for any country that wants to advance, any society that wants to advance.
Yeah, I agree with you. You need sensible alternatives that are available to people, because if they don't have them, they're just going to do what they need to do to survive. And at that point, the calculation is, well, screw everybody else, because this government's not even helping me. I'm just going to help myself, and I'm going to do things my way. And yeah, that's more like city planning, and at a government level you want to discourage people from doing that. But in order to do that, like you said, you have to provide them with public transportation, you have to do all these other things, hopefully to discourage people from just doing what people will naturally do, which is take care of themselves. And this is, we're actually seeing this with the coronavirus, with people. You see that people are acting very selfishly to protect themselves, to hoard food, to take care of
Hmm.
themselves first before they think about the community. And even the whole issue with the face masks. You know, people, when I see people out on the street, they're wearing face masks because they're protecting themselves. I'd venture to say, based on the American culture, most of them are worried about themselves, whereas there's probably a very small fraction of people that are wearing them because they're actually being good participants of the community, and they're trying to prevent uh, they're uh, protecting others from themselves. Because if you're
Hmm.
sick, or if you may be asymptomatic, you don't want to take that risk, so you wear the mask to protect others. But again, the way I see it, more people are wearing them because they're just thinking about themselves as opposed to thinking about others.
Interesting. And as we talk about this topic, I think it brings us to the other one, which is crime. Crime is down for now
Yeah.
because people are getting having the support. Although there have been reports of, unfortunately, people breaking into small businesses, stealing things. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think that's saying that crime and survival go hand in hand, but in some ways they do, right? You're gonna have to do what you can to survive, and if that means having to steal something, I think you're gonna have to do it because you're providing for yourself or for your family.
Yeah, and I actually see if I don't lose our audience with this train of thought here. But when it comes to stealing, I have no opinion, or I don't have a necessarily. It's not black and white with me, because I understand that if people need to, no matter who you are, you're going to steal if it means that you need it to survive or take care of your family. Most people will. But see, I think that those people always uh, they disproportionately and unfairly get criticized. The people that do that,
Hmm.
because see, everyone in one sense or another steals, but the people that don't have to steal right now, you know why they don't have to steal? A lot of them, because they've already been stealing a little bit from the population for the last 10, 20 years. So they've already hoarded up a whole bunch of wealth. So when things mess up, they have savings, they have enough to get by, and they have access to food and to whatever they need, because they get into professions where they're just legally stealing. And then they turn around, and then they look down on the people that have to resort to stealing or breaking into grocery stores to steal because they need essentials. So again, it's like, it's a weird, I'm sure there's more to it than that, but that's how I always see it when I see people stealing. It's like, oh man, I feel sad that I feel, part of me feels bad that they waited till now to realize that they need to steal. It's like, hey, if you would have realized uh, 20 or 30 years ago that there's a smart way to steal from everyone else, you should have just done that. And now, I'm not saying that stealing is a good thing, but the government steals from the people. They steal your tax money. The banks steal from you. They steal whenever you go to the ATM. They take money from you. Whenever anybody is taxing you in any way, because it's not really just trading. You're not bartering directly. There's businesses that credit card companies, right? They're stealing from you. They're stealing from you, and yeah, sure, that's a bad thing. But at least if you're doing that stuff, that's the way society functions. And if you
Well, it's not
just,
stealing, it's providing a service. Government
dude,
is providing a
these
service.
guys are
A
stealing money
bank is
from everyone
providing a
else.
service.
The banks are the biggest thieves, and they'll repossess your home if if they get a chance to, because maybe you're late on a payment or something. And they'll, first of all, they'll give you a loan that they may know that you're not going to be able to repay, and then they'll just repossess it from you if you can't pay. Dude, that's theft, right?
I mean,
So,
that's one, but they also invest and lend out money to a lot of people who are going to be able to pay back and who use the opportunity to for that loan either to get that car, to get into that house, and having that stability and people to be able to pay and creates money, and then they can take that money and invest
right,
it
but
somewhere else or
I'm
give it.
not.
So
Yeah,
I
I'm
think
not.
there is some good benefit.
Well, yeah, there's benefits to the essential function that these institutions are supposed to provide, but that's different than providing that essential function and then stealing while you're doing
Hmm.
that. And that's what I mean by there's so many people in this society that steal on a daily basis. They just do it within the regulations of what the society allows, but it's still stealing. And yet the only ones that get the shame, the ones that get the finger pointed at, is the people that didn't do any of that stealing to begin with, because for whatever reason, and then a coronavirus hits and they are left with nothing, and then they resort to stealing, which is no different than what the other people have been doing. So I don't like how a group, as a specific group of people, the ones that steal at the very end, get disproportionately criticized, well, when everybody else participates in a system that is essentially stealing from each other. Yeah, a
Interesting.
little bit of a rant. I don't want to feel like every time we mention something positive, I have to like talk about something that's slightly negative.
Stealing from a stolen country. Oh,
Yeah, well, I mean,
from stolen land,
The
stolen
United
people.
States is stealing. We steal wealth from every other country. That's the way that's how this society is so prosperous. But uh, save it for another time.
Positive. Keep it
Yeah,
positive,
stay
Romero.
positive. Stay positive.
But I have to say, on keeping it positive, I do admire your ability to go back in a conversation and being able to track back a train of thought. That's something that I admire on you because I get so carried away with whatever the next topic is, and you're able to bring us back so we can stay focused, man.
I think it's my insecurity that I'm always going off on tangents, and so I'm personally aware of how sometimes in conversations I go off on a tangent, and so
Yeah.
I need to always mindfully keep track of them, because I don't, because that's really rude if I'm doing that to people all the time and I'm going in different directions. I want to come back because I want to let them know, like, hey, I didn't hijack the conversation with you. I just wanted to insert a little bit of information, but let's go back to what
More
you were saying, though,
context.
because what you were saying is important. So I have
It's
to unwind.
it's like you have an outline in your mind and you're making these points, and then, oh, let me go back to the original point. Let's go back to the original conversation. And then speaking of tangents, shout out to the group True Mexican Lifestyle for following us on Instagram. Those are our first followers.
All
So for
right.
those who are listening, connect with us on the Brown Perspective now. We're on Insta now,
We put
doing big
we
things.
put the in front of it.
No, no, we didn't put it.
Okay.
Was Brown Perspective.
Okay.
So search it, make sure that I'm connecting. And what we say is we are thought provoking commentary on current events, culture, history, and politics from a Latino lens,
Nice.
exploring and challenging our own biases and blind
Can
spots.
we put that in YouTube as well? I know that there's a section where we can put about our about page here, maybe. Yeah, we should put that here as well. That I like that. That's what we came up with on the Google Doc some time ago.
Yes.
Nice.
So shout out once again to
To
our followers, True Mexican Lifestyle.
nice.
True
I
Mexican Lifestyle.
yeah.
I wonder why they like us. They know we have a Mexican on the team.
A Mexican. What I need to get on Instagram. When did you get on Instagram, by the way? Because I know that that's probably one of the signs that you're getting old these days if you're not on Instagram. Because
Instagram.
everybody,
Dude, I've been Instagram for a while.
what happened to what about Snapchat? Is that still?
I think some people are still using it. I don't use it as much because basically you can do the same thing you used to be able to do on Snapchat on Instagram now.
Hmm.
And I think Instagram is just more. I mean, I had Instagram for a while, and I think I always saw it as a place where creative people went to. I mean, people usually do more artsy photos and things like that. So it's definitely more of a creative platform. And I use it to follow artists, obviously friends, but artists, musicians, and it's just more like a visual thing. So I've enjoyed it. And it just when you have Facebook, you have Snapchat, you have all these platforms. I know now what the kids are using are TikTok.
TikTok.
Um, TikTok, is
Yeah,
it?
yeah,
TikTok.
TikTok. That I do know because I didn't download it, but I know enough about it because it's a Chinese one, so I do follow that from the political aspect of it.
Yeah.
I got off of most of these, even Facebook. Like I said, I don't get into Facebook a lot because it's a huge echo chamber, and I'm not really learning or getting anything insightful from the feed. I just most of the news I just get it myself, and but I do use Twitter a lot, at least to read other people's tweets. I don't tweet as often, but anyway,
All right.
just saying, I may want to hop on the Instagram and have a page.
Do it. Do it. And the nice thing is you can use whatever name you want. So you
I'm
can
gonna
do some
say
creative license.
I'll say my name is Lucho.
Lucho, porque estás en la lucha,
Yeah, the struggle continues.
luchando juntos.
Yeah. What do we have any other sorry, before I get to that, by the way, so shout out to our first subscriber. Huge. We'll uh at some point, if we do gain any traction, we will do something special for our first subscriber
That's right.
way into the future. So before I think we've had a good run at this. Is there anything else about the positives that you want to talk about?
I think that for me, sort of a lesson is that, and part of what and this is from a quote that somebody at work shared, and I don't remember the whole quote, but it's something to the fact that, oftentimes these are challenges that define us, and sometimes we're ashamed or embarrassed of those things that define us, but it's challenge and going through a situation like this that really make us who we are, and sort of it's what gives our life meaning. So I think appreciating the positive one of the positive things of this situation is sort of testing our resiliency, both individually, as a family, as a society. And I think, I appreciate Oriental philosophy, and I know that in Chinese philosophy, that's one of the things that one of the proverbs, right? If you want to change the world, you change you change the government. You want to change the government, you change the society. You want to change the society, you change the family, and then the individual. But I think it also starts at the individual level. So it's actually the opposite. I apologize. It's like if you want to change the world, you change the individual, then you change the family, you change the society. So I think that that resiliency and that opportunity that we're getting ourselves to hopefully improve and be a better person while struggling a little bit. Hopefully, will bring a better tomorrow. You don't know how to respond.
Be the change you want to be in the world, Gandhi.
My life is my message. That's what I was gonna say with my name, with my Lucho.
Nice.
My life is my message, and la
I,
lucha siempre.
I think I was on mute earlier, by the way. Sorry. That's why you didn't hear me. But yeah, that's cool. All right, I'm gonna leave it at that because, as you can see, my I do share office space with my wife, and she's working today. So
Sounds good.
my time's up. My
All right,
45 minutes.
45 minutes of fame.
Yep. All right. Well,
All
we'll
right,
think of next
Romero.
time then.
Good conversation. Take care, and until the next time.
See you. Nos vemos.